Hello, welcome back to the Black Doctors Podcast. I'm Dr. Stephen Bradley, your friendly everyday anesthesiologist and podcast host. Sorry for my voice, a little under the weather, getting over a cold. This week on the show, we're going to dive into current events that are affecting our lives as healthcare workers, as pre-medical students applying to medical schools, those of us that work in the medical school admissions process and like to engage in mentoring of pre-medical students and medical students. We're going to talk later with Michael Johnson of Michael Johnson Legal. He's going to give us some updates regarding the new information from the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, where they propose a new rule to ban non-compete clauses, which hurt workers and harm competition. This is from earlier in the month of January of 2023. Michael Johnson is a lawyer. He specializes in physician contracts, and he's going to give us some updates on what this new proposed rule change may mean, if it means anything at all, and when we could expect some changes or results. Other things in the news that you may have seen: it is a mad dash to leave the U.S. News and World Reports. Residency programs or medical schools everywhere are dropping the U.S. News and World Reports like a bad habit. I think by last count, we were up to 12 programs that have dropped out of the top 20. As of 2023, the programs that have dropped so far was a number one seed, which was Harvard. NYU is still at number 2, last I checked. Number 3 is Columbia. In other news, you've probably heard that medical schools everywhere are dropping the U.S. News and World Report ranking system like a bad habit. I think over 12 schools so far have refused or declined to provide updated information to the U.S. News and World Report ranking system. The schools that have dropped so far include Harvard, Columbia, University of Pennsylvania, Stanford, University of Washington, Mount Sinai, Washington University, Cornell, and University of Chicago. Johns Hopkins as well has since dropped from the U.S. News and World Report ranking. What does that mean? I think personally, a lot of this has to deal with elitism in medicine. And I think it's fantastic that schools are starting to step back and protest and not be a part of this ranking structure, because the U.S. News and World Report ranking system isn't really based on the facts and the data of what it takes to produce a good physician. What is the ranking system based on? This is from an article on Stat News. It was actually written by Dr. Holly Humphrey. She was a former dean at the University of Chicago Pritzker School of Medicine. And this article was written back in November of 2022, entitled "Deans Dump That U.S. News and World Report Best Medical School Survey." So she's advocating for leaving this survey. She mentions how law schools were kind of the first to leave the U.S. News and World Report ranking system. And she talks about how significant it would be for medical schools to follow this pathway, again, because this ranking system is more of a money grab. It's a cash grab, and it serves to, show who is the quote unquote best medical school. And it pits these poor undergrad students that are trying to get into medical school, pits them against each other, fighting to get into these elite medical schools. And when it comes to residency programs on the other side, are they selecting based upon who got to go to these elite medical schools? If you take a look into what it actually means to be top of the list in the U.S. News and World Report, the ranking structure actually lacks utility and value. According to this article, does a grave disservice to medical school applicants and reinforces bias and other immoral practices. The U.S. News and World Report ranking system relies on a couple of data points. It looks at federal research dollars, which gives a disproportionate preference to larger schools. I can always look at this in comparison to the lens of my beloved Howard University or Morehouse or Meharry, these HBCU medical schools, which would never, reach the top of the U.S. News and World Report ranking, as you'll see, because of the things that the metrics that are listed. So federal research dollars, right? If you're a big name school with a huge endowment, with a huge undergrad, huge research arm, then you're going to get a lot more points in the U.S. News and World Report ranking system. At no point does this consider what benefit is actually trickling down to the medical students, or how the flow of research dollars into this institution supports their experiences or medical education. Another metric they look at is reputation. This is assessed by a survey of medical school deans, department chairs, residency program directors who could not possibly possess the necessary knowledge and judgment regarding quality of education at other medical schools in the country. So this just goes to the name brand schools, of course. Another metric they look at is the ratio of full-time students to faculty, regardless of that faculty's involvement in student education. So again, you have a large, prestigious institution with a huge research endowment. You're going to have a lot more faculty members that are probably just dedicated to research and may not even interact with medical students. So how is this really contributing to medical school education? They look at the students' median scores in the medical college admissions test and their undergraduate grade point average. These quantitative measures that are strongly influenced by economics and societal factors, so family wealth, opportunities to maintain education and be educated at some of the best of institutions, right? Then there's bias and discrimination within the educational environment and educational system itself. So we know there's problems with the MCAT and how it self-selects for people from different socioeconomic statuses and other factors. But this is a huge component of the U.S. News and World Report ranking system. Finally, there is the acceptance rate. So the proportion of students that are offered an admission compared to the number of students who apply. So this incentivizes schools to encourage applications and take those application fees from those students they have no intention of seriously considering for admission. So who wins with the U.S. News and World Report ranking system? It ultimately ends up being the U.S. News and World Report ranking system. They make tons and tons and piles of money off of this ranking system. Just like all those surveys you see in your hometown of a top doctor and this and that, oftentimes those are like paid surveys. So you just pay to enter, and then you'd vote for yourself or have your office nominate you, and then you can have your picture in a magazine. So I, for one, am excited to see this trend continue of these medical schools leaving the U.S. News and World Report ranking system. I think it is probably a bit performative at this point. You know, the OGs or originators or Harvard stated didn't have much to lose as they left the U.S. News and World Report ranking system. And then other schools, you know, once the top dog kind of leaves, well, we're going to follow suit because we don't have any, who are we being compared with now that folks are starting to leave? It's in vogue, it's trendy. So excited to see where this goes, and hopefully it's kind of provides a little bit more equity within this process of medical students that are applying for medical school, and how do you pick which medical school you go to. We should definitely be looking at other factors. How do you interface with the community? Where do your graduates end up practicing? Is there a goal towards teaching health equity and social determinants of health and other issues that have a significant impact on healthcare disparities and the health gaps and other issues, social issues that we have in this country. So that is something that is going on. We'll continue to watch. Now we're going to jump into an interview that I did with Michael Johnson of Michael Johnson Legal, and we're going to continue this conversation talking about the FTC and the new proposed rule change.